Hi, I'm Deborah from Fish Museum and Circus. In this video, we're going to make wrist corsage needle minders. First, we need the Flower Power Deep Etched die. I use my Sizzix Big Shot machine with this die. We're also going to need some felt. I've used some different greens for the leaves, and I've made several of these, so I have a variety of different color felt, and you can choose whatever you like. For the center, we're going to need some felted wool, and this is woven wool that has been felted, and you'll see why I like to use this for the centers. This particular selection is the Woolly Charms Critter Colors. We're also going to need some super strong magnets. These come often in a whole bunch of them, and you can use them for a variety of different projects. You have to be very careful about sliding these off. They are really super strong. The bigger ones, especially if you have those, it can actually be kind of dangerous in terms of you can pinch your fingers. These are nice and small, so you can use as many as you like in terms of taking off 1, 2, 3 for whatever project you're going to use. We're also going to need some elastic. This is a 1/4 inch elastic. You can choose a color if you'd like, or just plain white. You can also use a hairband if that's more easily accessible to you. For the deep etch die, this all comes attached together, and you'll want to take a wire cutter and cut them all apart. You may also want to use a little sandpaper. Sometimes these little parts can be kind of sharp, so you want to be really careful about that. For this project, we're going to use this shape, and 2 leaf shapes, and then also this circle. I've used my Sizzix Big Shot machine to cut the pieces. And what I've done is cut one of this big flower shape. I've used this shape to cut 3 in 3 different colors. And you can cut as few or as many of these as you'd like. If you look at this one over here, I've used this big shape for the back and then cut 2 of these other shapes for petals. And with this one, I've cut 4 out of that shape. So for this next one that I'm going to do, I cut 3 of them, and you can use as few or as many as you'd like. I've also cut a variety of these leaf shapes, and we can see how many of those we want to use as we go on. And then from this circle, I've cut a circle from the felted wool for the middle of the flower. Now we want to create the base for the wrist corsage, and we're going to need this backing piece and the elastic. And you can measure the elastic by just putting it around your wrist and seeing about how tight you want it and how big it really needs to be. I know from the previous wrist corsages that I've made that I like mine to be about 6 inches. So I'm going to cut my elastic at 6 inches. Now we're going to take this backing piece and I'm going to fold it in half like this. And what we're going to do is cut 2 slits in it so that the elastic can feed through. And this is about, 2 inches. And what I want to do is make 2 slits that are about 3/4 inches apart. So I'm just taking a little bit of chalk because this felt is so dark and I want to be able to see it. And I'm going to just make a mark about 3/8 on that side of the halfway mark, which, since this is 2 inches wide, is going to be the 1 inch. So I'm going to go 3/8 that way, and I'm going to go 3/8 this way, just so I know where to cut. And then I'm going to have 3/4 between the outside marks. And I'm just going to clip a little bit. If our elastic is 1/4 inch wide, we want to cut maybe 1/8 of an inch. So that way when we open this up, our slits are about 1/4 of an inch wide. I'm going to feed the end of the elastic, one side through one of the slits and one side through the other slit. And you can always make your slits a little bit bigger if you need to. And then we're going to sew the ends of the elastic together, so then we have a base to build our flower on. To sew the ends together, I am just going to match them up, and I am going to just do a whip stitch over the top. I just want to make sure that this is really secure so that the elastic doesn't come apart. I'm going over the top here a number of times to make sure that it's secure. It doesn't have to be pretty because this is going to be hidden by all the rest of the petals. And now I just want to kind of double check my fit and make sure that it's going to be the right tightness on my wrist. Now let's work on the center of the flower. I have my felted wool circle here, and I'm going to make a running stitch all the way around the outside, about maybe just a little bit of 1/8 of an inch in, not too close to the edge, but not too far in that we lose a lot of the circle. And the reason that I like using this felted wool as opposed to the felt is that this has a nice little stretch to it, and you'll see as we make it into the center that it makes a nice smooth circle. So I've come all the way around the circle with a little running stitch, and before I close it all up, I want to put my magnet inside. And I'm going to use 2 of these magnets. These are very small, and so 2 will give it a little bit more strength. And I'm taking a little bit of, this happens to be wool batting, but any kind of fill or batting that you have will work. And I'm wrapping the magnets in the batting and making as much of a kind of a little ball flat circle of it as I can. And then it's going to go right into the center of our little middle here. And we're going to pull our threads up, gather that up, tuck everything inside as we go. I did use a double thread for this to make it a little bit stronger so that when we're pulling on the gathers, it will be strong enough to withhold that stress. You can also use a thicker upholstery thread or something like that. And I'm going to kind of just shape that a little bit and then secure this off, but then also go across the center here, go a little bit to the side, and I'm going to kind of make a little star shape through the middle to hold everything in place. It doesn't have to be super cinched in, but I want to create that nice rounded center. And I want to check the other side periodically and make sure that I'm getting that nice little center. Just going back and forth across the middle here. Okay, last check on this side. And double check that the magnet is working, which it is. and I'll secure this off on this side. Now we're ready to assemble the wrist corsage needle minder. We have our base, we have our petals, and we have our center. Now you can put them together individually. You can sew these on one at a time, or you can actually sew them on all together at the same time. It's really up to you what you're most comfortable with. Another option for the petals, you can layer them the way they are. I like to kind of offset them so that you can see the underneath petals a little bit better. And then what will happen is that this will go in the center like that. But what I've done for this one is I've actually made the top ones smaller than the bottom petal piece. And I'm going to show you how to do that in case that's something that you want to do. So it's really very simple. I'm taking the one that I want to make smaller, which would be the top one. And let's just make sure, let's look at the colors and see if they're layered in the way we want them to. Don't know. Let's see what happens if let's turn the whole thing over and get that lighter color on the bottom. We could do it that way. Or let's put this one here and see what happens if we do that. I actually think I like this one on the top. What happens if this one's on the bottom? So it's really fun to play around with the different colors and see what you can do. So yeah, I like this one, this bright blue on the top. So I want to make this a little smaller so that you can see the rest of the colors a little bit better, and it kind of creates a little bit more of a layered look. So I'm going to fold this in half and in half again. And I'm going to cut out of the center, which will now be that little point there, a little semicircle, so that when I open it up, I now have this circle in the middle. And I'm going to make a running stitch around that circle. And pull that, and now I'm getting kind of a smaller, more ruffly set of petals, and we're going to secure that. So now when I put this on top, like this, and then put the center in, I'm going to get a little bit more of a ruffly layered petal look. And you can actually do that with the middle one also. You could make it a little bit smaller if you cut a slightly smaller circle. And you can do this with as many of these petal sections as you want. So I'm going to sew all of the petals on at once, and then I am going to sew the center on. You can, as I mentioned before, sew each petal layer on one at a time. You can even sew all the petal layers and the center on all at once. That's fine too, whatever you're most comfortable with. I'm going to sew the petals on all together and then the center. And I'm going to just shift some of these around because now that they're kind of gathered, they have a little bit of a mind of their own. So let's see kind of where we want them to be. I've put a pin through all of the layers so that they won't shift around so much. And I'm going to start by hiding my knot underneath this petal layer. And I've doubled my thread to make things a little bit stronger. I'm going to go through all 3 layers of petals. And then I'm going to take a stitch in the backing piece about halfway through the thickness of the felt so that I don't get a stitch on the back. It's fine if you want to go all the way through the backing and make the stitch like that. I just happen to like the way it looks without the stitches on the back. Then I'm going to go back up through all of the petal layers. Back down through the petal layers. Let's move the pin a little bit here. Put it over there. So back down through all of the petal layers, and then partway through the thickness of the backing piece. Back up through the petals. Back down through the backing. Back up and all the way around so that the petals are secure on the backing. Now that the petals are sewn on, you can see that the part of the elastic that we connected together is hidden underneath all the petals. And now we just have to sew on the center. And I still have the thread attached from when I did my petals. And I'm going to put the center in there. And let's see about moving some of these petals again, because they have decided to go their own way. So let's just move these around a little bit. And then I'm going to take a little stitch kind of on the side of the center. And then attaching it to the petals. And a little stitch on the side. And we're going to sew this all the way around. All of the petals are on, the center is securely attached, and I'm just going to tie this off. And we can hide the knot underneath the center. Now I'm ready to add the leaves. You could add the leaves right really at the beginning. You could sew them on when you're sewing the elastic together. You could sew them right into there. You can sew them on when you're sewing the petals. I kind of like to sew them on after so I can see how it's all going to go together. So I have a couple of different leaves, different colors, and these kind of shapes here. And let's see what we might like. I kind of like that color, and maybe a little bit of these half ones like this. Maybe something fun like that. You can add leaves on the other side or however you like. I think I kind of just like it like that. So then what I'm going to do is they're kind of tucked under here in between the backing and that first layer of petals. And I'm just going to sew them on like we did the petals, in that I am going halfway through the thickness of the backing and then just sewing on the leaves securely so that they stay in place. And there we go, the wrist corsage needle minder. And these are great for making for gifts for friends, all of your sewing friends, and they're just really fun to have around and really convenient.